Hello, my name is Ian. I'm the Director of Emergency Disaster Services for the Salvation Army's Intermountain Division. I just wanted to thank you for clicking on this video. This video is part of our webinar series that we're doing this year in 2024, just covering all sorts of unique topics related to our emergency disaster services. Please enjoy this video and reach out to our department if you have any questions when you're done. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Have a good day. Please know that this is just an Intermountain EDS presentation. Not just, but this is coming from things that we do in our division. It could be very different in other parts of our territory. It's very different in other territories as well. So please just recognize if I say something and it doesn't sound right, feel free to put that in the chat and I will joyfully kind of like comment on that. But just kind of giving that disclaimer. All right, so I think what we're going to do for these webinars is we're always going to start off with just a couple baseline things, just so we are all on the same page. What is Emergency Disaster Services? It's a ministry of the Salvation Army that has been in place since 1900 to serve and assist survivors and first responders facing emergencies and disasters, right? An emergency is a smaller event. Think about a house fire. A disaster is like a wildfire or something where a community would need a lot of resources to provide support. So this is something that, and I very specifically write ministry there. This is like one of the most important things that the Salvation Army does. The community expects us to be there, right? I always throw this out as kind of a menu, right? And this is very different depending on where we are around the country, on what services the Salvation Army might provide. So food service, emergency assistance, sometimes we help with cleanup and reconstruction. Sometimes we do donations management, disaster case management, that's helping people in recovery, emotional and spiritual care. We do emergency communications, and then in some circumstances, we help with sheltering. Again, like this list is different everywhere, right? Even within our division, we do these things in different parts. And the last kind of thing to throw out there is just kind of covering the disaster cycle. And this is pretty much just shows that it's in a constant world, and we are generally involved in the entire disaster circle. So preparedness is like, when we're giving messaging to families or our congregations, just kind of your personal preparedness on what you can do if a disaster is going to happen. Response is when that thing happens, right? And that's when we are very much known to come out and bring and provide feeding support. Recovery is when it gets very long, right? And the Salvation Army is very often involved and is a leader in recovery. In our division, we had the Marshall Fire in Boulder, and that was over 2 years ago now, and we are still involved, providing financial support and supporting. And then it gets into mitigation. And mitigation is like when we are working on our properties, we are hardening things, for IT, like we're beefing up our IT stuff so that way when something happens, it impacts us less. And so this is basically a circle that just keeps going around and around. So just wanted to cover that. So we'll see if this works. This is the first time I'm trying this. If you guys all are so willing, you can scan that code on your phone and answer this question, or you can go to that website and answer this question. Now, I fear that this isn't going to work quite as perfectly. I know if I had the other website open, it would come up near immediately. But the question for you guys is, what nonprofit partners do we work with in disaster relief and response? So who do you guys think we work with? And I'll give you guys, a couple seconds to throw this in. And I see right there, Doug, you put it in the chat. That's also totally fine too if you want to see there. Doug said Southern Baptist, which is great. So we'll give that awkward 30 seconds of silence. And then we should start to see some responses coming in. So we've got 6 so far already. We've got Red Cross, Red Crods. Maybe that's a typo. I'm not sure. But I see several. FEMA, that's kind of correct, right? And here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to go back on the slide, and then I'm going to go forward again and see if it loads more results. So we've already got 10 now. Other ministry organizations. Yes, so we partner a lot with faith-based organizations. FEMA, the reason why I say FEMA is because they are government, right? So they are not a nonprofit, but we work with them. I see in the chat, Mark wrote LDS, so Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yes, they are one of our biggest partners, and we'll share that. I see a lot of people, we're already starting to get into VOAD. So some people are saying VOAD, which is great, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Habitat for Humanity, local government, state government, COADs, VOADs. Yes, so I think we're all getting there. All right, so what I wanted to do was highlight some of our major partners. And we cannot go anywhere without mentioning the Red Cross first, right? They are the largest disaster relief nonprofit, right? We jokingly say we make a great number 2. You know, we don't get yelled at quite as much as our friends do. So here's what I wanted to cover for Red Cross. They're known for disaster relief, military support, blood services, and community preparedness training. So we very much work with them on their preparedness stuff. And here's where we get into acronyms. ARC, which is obviously a nightmare for us with the Salvation Army because American Red Cross is the same as our Adult Rehabilitation Command. In Intermountain, there's a big thrift company out here called ARC, which is ARC as well. So this is where acronyms quickly become an issue. They respond to an emergency every 8 minutes, and the majority of those are home fires, right? Which is great. 95% of their disaster relief workers are volunteers, and it's 100% something that we need to do as an organization of better emulating. They really give a lot of their volunteers leadership positions. They are mandated by U.S. Congress to coordinate mass care support. So on one hand, while the Salvation Army is very much expected to provide support, they are mandated by government that they must. And so that includes sheltering, feeding, bulk distribution, and reunification stuff. So that means reunification is when, you know, families are evacuating and they need to get a hold of themselves when they've all been displaced. Very often we partner with them for feeding, right? It kind of goes on a few things that they provide. They usually lead sheltering efforts. They do damage assessment. They provide a lot of financial assistance right at the beginning. And at the bottom of all of these slides, I'm adding how we partner with them, right? So we absolutely partner with them in emergency disaster relief, very often with feeding support, with sheltering. We co-train our volunteers in this division. We haven't done it well in quite some time, but we will give their volunteers training, and they will give our workers training. We share facilities and assets. And here's one that's definitely a marquee for us. We lead the nonprofit disaster relief sector together. When we start to talk more about VOAD stuff, very often in the organizations that are in charge or lead a VOAD there's often someone from the Salvation Army and often someone from the Red Cross in the room. So we work really closely with them. And I added this picture on the top left of some feeding support that we actually did for a large apartment fire in Aurora, where we actually had Red Cross personnel, you know, helping us serve meals, right? I believe it was Doug who said it earlier, Southern Baptist, right? Southern Baptist are one of our biggest partners nationally. There's that other organization right there that's called Send Relief. They've kind of rebranded themselves to try to attract younger groups of volunteer bases. So Send Relief is really the same thing as Southern Baptist. They bring help, hope, and healing, right? There you go. We Have Hope is on the way. They are a faith-based collaboration of Southern Baptist churches across the U.S. that provide assistance to communities affected by disasters. Their services include feeding support, cleaning and debris removal, spiritual care, laundry services, and shower services. We partner with them in disaster relief. We co-train volunteers and we share assets. Some of my best feel-good stories, we could just have a war story webinar where we all just share great stories that we've experienced out in the field, but a lot of our great stories come with partnering with them. These pictures that I have on here, on the top left, that is our volunteers working with their volunteers for the Marshall Fire when we were providing meal support to people. And the picture on the right is we very often use our generator trailer to support their feeding operations around our division. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? They are quickly growing to be one of the Army's biggest partners, especially within our division, with their church being headquartered in Utah. They work in conjunction with, and this is kind of like their standard messaging there, they work in conjunction with civil authorities and relief organizations to supply basic provisions and services. They are incredible partners to us. And that's kind of that next point there. They've supported us with financial, product, and volunteer support for incredibly sizable projects. They helped us in the largest way with COVID-19, new immigrant efforts. We are actually working with them right now on 5,000 hygiene kits to be distributed to new immigrants and unhoused individuals within the Intermountain division. They help us with exercises, and then with kind of the more traditional natural and man-made disasters. That picture on the top left there is of a massive food distribution that happened in COVID-19 in Aurora, Colorado. And the picture on the right is their volunteers coming out to our warehouse, helping us pack food boxes, I think for that same event. But they are incredible partners. And I will say the one thing that I admire the most about JCLDS is that they very rarely want any sort of recognition for their partnership and support. They are happy to help us and not take all of the limelight. And I think that means a lot these days. Team Rubicon, I'm pretty sure this is the last organization that I'm kind of like highlighting at a higher level. Team Rubicon is a veteran-led organization. They certainly have, you can Google what they call their, I'm not going to say it on this Salvation Army call, but they have a fun term for their volunteers who have not served in the military. But they're primarily veteran-led, and their services include debris removal and cleanup, incident management, because a lot of them come from a military background, so they're really good at coordinating efforts, volunteer management, mitigation, home repairs and rebuilding. Internationally, Team Rubicon is, I believe, the only American-based nonprofit that can provide medical care. So they will go out internationally and do medical relief. So in our division, we partner during kind of all of the disasters, but they also uniquely have a cage at our warehouse, and they store a lot of their supplies and vehicles at our warehouse. So that's a way we partner. And then also they've done some projects for our division up at High Peak Camp, which is our divisional camp. All right. So, and again, feel free to put any questions in the chat. Now we're kind of going into VOAD. And VOAD right there for that first acronym check, right? Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. So I'm going to show this video. You can see right there, it's 9 minutes and 29 seconds, but I absolutely love this video. It is the best. The audio should work, but it really shows the best picture of how we work together with all of our disaster relief nonprofits. And also, the Salvation Army is pretty well highlighted in this video for how we've been involved with VOAD for some time. And then we'll kind of go through and talk about the different VOAD networks around our division and territory. All right, I'm going to cross my fingers that it works.
National VOAD was born really out of a need in 1969 after Hurricane Camille hit the Gulf Coast. At that point in time, faith-based organizations were really leading disaster response and recovery in the United States. So 6 faith-based organizations came together alongside the American Red Cross, and they asked themselves, is there a way that we can do this without duplicating services in a specific disaster area? Is there a way that we can do this better together? So soon after that, in 1979, FEMA was formed, and emergency management became more professional on the state and local level. We followed suit in that same way, and state VOADs were born in the 80s and 90s, and now we have one in every single state and territory, totaling 56.
Well, it was significant because it was the first time a Category 5 had hit since 1969, and it hit in a major metropolitan area, Dade County, Miami. All the infrastructure was destroyed. There were no grocery stores, there were no drug stores or anything. The Salvation Army immediately mobilized to get the necessities in. So we set up a center in Homestead, and we used that as a staging area. Other agencies would come and we would be able to work together. We had our mobile kitchens there, as well as in Fort Lauderdale, where we had the bulk of our supplies. You needed to help normalize life, get people some good hot food, stuff like that. What Andrew did for a lot of us was help us to realize we need to professionalize a lot more. In order to be effective, we had to figure out a way to work together. We had to figure out a way to build on the strengths of different organizations, different agencies, to meet the needs of the people who were just in desperate situations.
You know, on the morning of September 11th here in New York City, it was a beautiful day that everyone knows turned tragic for the whole country and world. In terms of how it changed things for the faith sector and the human services sector in the city, we'd all worked together for decades, but we'd never really worked in a coordinated way to respond to a crisis across the entire city and that affected the entire country. The emotional and spiritual toll that 9/11 took on New Yorkers was breathtaking. The need for spiritual care, disaster chaplains was profound. Thousands served at Ground Zero. So the spiritual services that were provided, the emotional support systems that were put in place were critical not only to the families of the victims and the recovery workers, but also to the long-term recovery community of first responders and volunteers and unionized workers that helped dig out the pit.
I think Hurricane Katrina was significant for its scope and scale, but I think we can't even have that conversation until we really first acknowledge how horrific that event was, and that the response of the voluntary agencies was challenged beyond our wildest dreams. We said at the time that case management is the key to recovery. Having experienced being a disaster case manager after 9/11, the importance of all of a person's recovery is key. So not just a roof over your head, which is critically important, of course. But there are so many other aspects of who we are as human beings that need attention. And that case manager has to learn how to communicate with people who have all kinds of expressions of grief and loss and suffering, and really tie into them in those notions of what's really at the root of their suffering that they can alleviate immediately so that we can then take their next brave steps together in their recovery. Case management and that relationship is probably the most important avenue for the most vulnerable people.
So if there's any kind of best case scenario when it comes to a disaster response and volunteer management, this was it. It was a very large disaster, but it was also very contained. National Guard was set up a secure perimeter around the town. So the only way that volunteers could come in is if they went through our volunteer reception center. And so that allowed for very easy tracking of those volunteer hours. It made sure that those volunteers were used in safe and appropriate ways, that they had the oversight that they needed and the safety precautions that were needed, and also kept those volunteers out of the way of other first responders and life-saving operations that were going on, particularly around search and rescue. So we knew from 9/11 and from Hurricane Katrina that managing those spontaneous volunteers that show up after disaster was incredibly important. What we learned from Joplin is this is what can happen when we have a highly coordinated volunteer mission.
We all knew that it was going to be a devastating event and a major disaster, but it was only after that we could see the extent of the damage.
When you're looking at 17 counties in Texas, hundreds of thousands of homes that were impacted, to be able to bring together our national VOAD leadership and to look at organizations that had experience not only in disaster case management, but also in the management role.
Catholic charities who were responsible for providing the disaster case management training and ongoing training.
Doing the financial oversight that St. Vincent de Paul did.
And the ICNA Relief was in charge of resource management. Luther Disaster Response provided all of the compliance. Project Comeback, it gave us that opportunity to see that we can maybe take this to the next level.
So I think it's been a great national model. It shows that organizations can work together. We're not competing against each other, we're complementing each other.
And truly become a platform that will raise the level for disaster response and recovery. Things are changing so fast, and the role of younger volunteers is vital. We have to really look for ways to bring them in. We need their expertise.
I think as faith-based organizations, a lot of times we are set in our ways.
Making sure that we're out in the community.
We have to be prepared for whatever the future brings to us.
COVID-19 has changed everybody's world.
That was a startling reality that we were facing. And I think now that as we look to the future, we know that we need to adapt to the specific community and the specific disaster that is facing them.
How can we help the family recover in a manner that is respectful, dignified, uplifting, non-judgmental?
It's paramount that in our 50th year as the VOAD movement, and in essence 50 years since the civil rights movement, that we take far more seriously what it means to reflect the nation that we serve.
The way that we build resilient communities and the way that we recover from disasters.
Getting stronger community support, getting those community members that are going to be leading the recovery engaged sooner, getting them the training and the technical assistance and the resources.
That everyone has a seat at the table, that everyone is brought to bear their expertise, their understanding, their experience. This diversity, I think, can only enrich the effort.
Those of us who are part of National VOAD, we have a wonderful story to tell.
Collaborating,
Cooperating, communicating.
and coordinating.
We are a very resilient people surviving through all this. And I think that says a lot to the tenacity, to the mission, and to the heart and soul of this organization.
See, I love that video because it kind of like, it really packages a lot of the stuff that we do well. It shows how there's so many different organizations that are involved. So yeah. And again, if you guys have any questions or you saw anything in there that you have a question about or comment, feel free to put it in the chat. You could see the Salvation Army was obviously in that quite a bit, which is great. So the VOAD movement started in, and I will just give a time check. It's 12:30. So I'm gonna probably fast forward my ranting here, and we'll probably be done in about 5 to 10 minutes through this presentation, and then we'll just kind of like open it up for questions as well. But just to give you guys a time check. So the VOAD movement was started in 1970. Today we have 56 territories, and that's, so it's like states as well as territories, right? There is a national organization, there are state networks, and then there's tons of regional ones now. And we kind of all have the 4 C's, or the foundation of how we connect with each other is kind of on the 4 C's: communication, coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. But the great thing about VOAD is it helps us with that silent C, which is competition. Because really, as you guys can imagine, our organizations, you could look at it as if we're competing with partners, right? We're competing for donor dollars so we can actually serve people, right? Through VOAD, I can tell you in the time that I've been involved, we've been able to have some really productive conversations with partners to ensure that we're supporting survivors and people in the best way. And we're keeping survivors centric to what we're doing versus our own organizations needing to be the most important. All right, so how do we fit into VOAD? So there's national VOAD. The Salvation Army actually has someone on the national VOAD board right now, and they are, that's Kevin Ellers, and he's the territorial EDS director for the Central Territory. Within our division, I serve as the vice chair for Colorado. Kiara serves as the secretary for Utah. Jim, who's on here, serves as the president. Joe, who I don't think is on here, he's an employee of the Helena Corps. He serves as the president for Montana VOAD. And then we also have all of those regional VOADs and COAD networks. A lot of our core officers and center coordinators and other leads around our division serve and host those meetings. And that's the next acronym, COAD here. So that stands for Community Organizations Active in Disaster. I will tell you, I don't care if your local network wants to be a COAD or a VOAD. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But generally, it's kind of the Association of Disaster Relief Nonprofits. This picture up here on the left is we actually hosted, or actually once a year, we try to host a Colorado VOAD meeting at our High Peak camp. The picture on the bottom right is, this just kind of shows some of the cool opportunities that we get to have as being a part of VOAD. That's myself, Dennis from the Baptists, Casey, who's our chair right now of Colorado VOAD, Mike from UMCOR, United Methodists, and then my friend, I'm going to go with Pastor, but I'm getting it wrong. He's one of the chaplains for the American Red Cross. We actually went to NORAD, which is U.S. North Command for the military, and we met with military leadership and National Guard leadership to brief them on what our organizations do. And it gave them an opportunity for ask us questions on how our organizations can support them. So that's just kind of like a fun example of some of the unique opportunities that we get by being a part of this larger network. Yes, like the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. This building in the background is actually the new one, because unfortunately people found out about the Cheyenne Mountain, and now you can go on a tour if you know somebody. But this building in the background is kind of the building that serves that purpose, kind of Monday through Friday. Some of this, so this is just an example. These are some of our Colorado-based ones, and we're actually missing one that Christina is on here, is a part of. We have a new COAD, which is the Aspen, or the West Mountain COAD, or VOAD. But anyway, Literally this morning, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, Sarah, who's on our team, along with the Pueblo Corps officer, were at the South Region VOAD meeting. I think the Corps was hosting that meeting today, which is great. So I have this funny little infographic here. This is where I'm going to put the VOAD hat on, right? And when I say we, I mean VOAD. Just so you guys understand when I'm saying we, I'm not talking necessarily about the Salvation Army. So what are we? We are a coalition of nonprofit organizations, a forum to share knowledge and resources. Co-VOAD, or just VOAD in general, is non-operational. The members are, right? So unfortunately, when I was the chair of Colorado VOAD, I didn't have any authority, right? It's not like I could call the American Red Cross and say, go serve these people on the street corner, right? That we are voluntary organizations. They can ask permission, right? But we can't tell, or they can't tell. So that's always clear. It always terrifies me in a state or a national or a local plan when it says the VOAD will do this, because the VOAD doesn't do anything. It's traditionally our members that do this stuff, right? It's the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and Team Rubicon. And we're volunteer led. Yes, I'm an employee of the Salvation Army, but technically I'm volunteering in that role. And that's the same with everybody who kind of serves in a leadership role with VOAD for the most part. This may appear like we're getting in the weeds, but the one reason why I wanted to cover this is we do have committees that operate together. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up in this group is like the Salvation Army, we are a part of the Colorado VOAD Disaster Spiritual Care Subcommittee. And the way it works these days is very often when government calls or community calls and they need help for like spiritual care, in some communities, what they will do is instead of call like the Salvation Army, what they'll do is they'll call Colorado VOAD and say, hey, we need 10 spiritual care providers to come out to this community. Can your committee do this? So unfortunately, when we had the mass shooting in Boulder, Colorado a few years ago, this is how it worked. They called Colorado VOAD and they said, hey, we need 10 to 15 spiritual care providers. The Salvation Army, we sent 2 officers. The Adventists sent some spiritual care providers. And there are a few other organizations that sent spiritual care providers. So I share this simply to say this is how some of our partners are asking us to help these days. And it's great because we are trusted. They know that we are all on the same page about our training. So yeah, if you have any questions about that, throw that in the chat. This is just a reflection, and I'll go through this quickly. But this just shows you a picture of who our members are in Colorado VOAD. And you can see it's a lot of the organizations that we've spoken about. If you see any there that you have any questions about, put them in the chat. We pay dues. We vote on things. Generally, we are trusted as a VOAD organization because for the most part, I say that for the most part, right? Because, you know, we're a volunteer-led organization and we can't police every aspect of every single thing we do. People trust us because if you're a VOAD, that means generally that we follow what's called the points of consensus, where we all have an agreement of how we're going to operate appropriately at a disaster site. And also our volunteers and our EDS workers are all background checked, right? A community can trust us. And then we, of course, encourage all of the traditional FEMA training to our people. Here's a list of nonprofit partners. So these guys aren't technically members of CoVOAD, but they're partners of CoVOAD. And I always have to throw out the disclaimer. This is not the bad list. These are people that might have not become member. They might have fallen off of membership because they didn't pay dues, or they had turnover, employee turnover, right? So this list is certainly not any less than the other group. But this just kind of shows you, it broadens the partners. And then this is just a quick snapshot of all of the government partners that we work with. Your EDS department, and I say your because I know some of you are not in our division, which is incredible. your EDS department works really hard to maintain relationships, and we cannot do it on our own as well. We really rely on our core and our service extension centers and our volunteers in the field to help us maintain these relationships. But this just gives you a snapshot of all of the people that we maintain relationships with as far as government organizations. Because nowadays, if you're not on the plan to provide the thing, you're really not often welcome at the disaster site. So we work really hard with these organizations to ensure that we are on their plans and stuff. Again, if you have any questions on any of this, please feel free for now to throw it in the chat. This is just the kind of the large mega list that we provide to emergency management on. This is like all of the things that within our membership of VOAD, we can potentially provide support to in a community. It's a lot and it's incredible. But again, as you guys have seen, we can't do it by ourselves, right? We work with our partners. We have a website. All of us have websites, right? And again, like after this webinar, if you guys have any information about your specific or like VOAD network, you can reach out to our team and we will joyfully fill it in. And then this is our last slide, because I love this picture because it kind of shows how it all comes together. This is at an exercise a few years ago in Moab, Utah. It was a Utah VOAD kind of exercise. We were all working together. But this just shows you a picture of all of the partners that were involved. And while this was an exercise, it was very much a mitigation effort for the community of Moab. We were helping them prevent wildfires and helping them prevent flooding issues. So the Salvation Army, you can see that picture on the right. We had brought in a ton of our resources and volunteers to provide feeding for that week for all of the people that were involved in the exercise. Team Rubicon, they were doing a lot of the work out in the field every day, chainsawing, doing all of that mitigation work. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they actually provided the Salvation Army all of the food product, right? They have an incredible network of food product around the country, and that's how they were involved. They provided us with all the food. The American Red Cross provided sheltering support and training for participants in the exercise. The Church of Scientology, you can see there's some pictures there. They helped us on that picture on the bottom left. Actually, I want to say these volunteers that were with us, or many of these volunteers, were actually volunteers from the Southwest Division, which is great. They came up from Las Vegas area. So that was one thing that was really cool as far as the Salvation Army perspective goes. It was a cross-divisional exercise. But Church of Scientology, they provided volunteer support. And then the last group that was involved were the Southern Baptists. They brought their shower and laundry trailers out there, so that way all of the participants could take showers and shower. This is exactly how it works in a big traditional disaster that you see on TV, right, that we're going to. We all come in and we complement each other based on what the need is of that specific event. So I love this. You see Captain Lawler, who was our corps officer in Salt Lake City. VOAD, Lisa, right there. She's with LDS, JCLDS, and Red Cross. And so this is kind of a great picture of our leadership team from that exercise. All right. I think you guys can unmute. I know I had that as a setting, but I know some of you guys are not muted, so I have no idea what's happening with Teams. But that's going to kind of close this out. We're basically going to do this for monthly, right? And we actually did a survey, just so you guys know, we did a survey for our officers in our division a few months ago, and we pretty much picked these and ordered these based on the things that they had asked for that they felt like we had not done in quite some time. And again, I said at the beginning, we are often caught doing all of our traditional trainings. So if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask. Feel free to throw stuff in the chat, email us. We're going to do this again this time next month. I can't remember what our next one is about. I don't know if it's about volunteer management and kind of Salvation Army volunteer management, but it's all kind of going in a sequence. Hilariously, we already have ideas for these webinars for next year already. I don't think we're going to do one in December, right? Because we're all going to be we're all going to be drowning in kettles, hilariously. But we already have plans for next year and ideas. We're going to bring in some guests for some of these. So please give us feedback on this, on if you think it went well, how we can improve this. So yeah, with that, yes, Doug.
So if there's, like, say, a disaster in Colorado,
yeah,
and going through this training on these webinars, could somebody come up from Albuquerque and help? I remember I was employed as social service extension officer in Butte when the Estes Park tragedy happened, and one of the envoy, Clay Little, came down and donated his time to be a chaplain.
So I would say, so absolutely. Now let me give you all of the Salvation Army red tape, right? There, of course, is our traditional intro course. One thing that's exciting is we've actually, the Western Territory has created a whole infrastructure on a new platform called Litmos. And we already have 3 EDS courses that are on there that we will all be working to get out to everybody, probably who's on this call, to take. So there is, of course, the requirements of, like, you must do the intro course, right? And you must have done some sort of volunteer or employment check with us as far as, like, background stuff. All of that very traditional stuff is still in place. And then the only other process to add to your question there, Doug, is just kind of the cross-divisional stuff, right? So you would go through your EDS director if you wanted to come and respond to something in another division. The latest big event that we had, and I was actually, again, like, ran out of things to talk about this year when we put this together, and who knows, maybe we can add one, is do an after action on our relief efforts in Maui. A few of our folk were sent to Maui to help. The Salvation Army is still well involved in that response or recovery now. But again, like, where my brain went with that, Doug, is there's of course a whole process of the divisions will usually say we need 10 volunteers for this thing, right? And then the other EDS directors will start to put together lists of people that are available. So I would bug anybody who's on here who is not a part of our division to bug your EDS director and say you want to continue to be involved. So yes, I saw Christina smile when I was talking about Maui. So I feel like it might be a little too late this time if we do this next year. A debrief on Maui next year, it might sound a little funny, but that's definitely something that we can consider doing. And again, I know we surveyed our divisional officers, but if there's something else that you guys want us to cover in an upcoming webinar, please, please, please just let us know. Being able to do this online is a gift, right? Because we don't have to, there is no possible way all of us that called into this would have ever been able to come together in a central location and do what we just did, right? So this gives us some incredible flexibility. All right, cool. Any other questions or thoughts before we jump? All right, I will just say in closing, thank you all so much. I cannot thank you enough. The most valuable thing to all of us is time, right? Thank you, Richard. The most incredible thing is time, right? It's valuable, and I hope that this has been worth your time. And I'm so excited to hopefully see many of you guys at our next one. And please reach out to our department if you need anything. All right. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.